We all know how Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed by fire from heaven. But what if I told you the real tragedy happened after the fire? Hidden in the hills, far from the ashes of Sodom, a disturbing story unfolded, one that birthed two nations and echoed the very sins God had just judged. In this video, we'll uncover how the sins of Sodom didn't die with the city, but lived on through Lot's own daughters, and how their actions changed the course of biblical history. Stay with me to the end, because what you're about to learn is not just history. It's a warning, a revelation, and a hidden thread that leads straight to the Messiah. A city consumed by sin. To understand what happened with Lot and his daughters, we must first revisit the city they came from, a place so wicked, God himself came down to see it. Sodom wasn't just sinful, it was a symbol of rebellion against God. Its name became synonymous with sexual perversion, pride, and unrestrained wickedness. According to Ezekiel 16:49, Sodom was guilty of arrogance, gluttony, and neglect of the poor and needy. But Genesis 19 gives us the full picture. The men of Sodom were so depraved that they tried to violate the angels who visited Lot. Lot, Abraham's nephew, had once chosen to pitch his tent near Sodom because the land looked fertile and prosperous. But the longer he stayed, the more entangled his family became in its corrupt lifestyle. By the time of Sodom's judgment, Lot wasn't living near the city. He was sitting in its gate, a position of influence. That's how deep he had embedded himself. Even in that corrupt place, God showed mercy. He sent two angels to rescue Lot and his household. But what's tragic is this. When Lot tried to warn his sons-in-law to flee, they laughed at him. His witness had no weight. The city had not only corrupted its citizens, but had numbed Lot's own family to the reality of God's judgment. Sodom was consumed by fire, but the seed of its sin was already planted deep within Lot's household. What happened next would prove that you can escape a city, but if the city is in your heart, the consequences will follow you. Escape from judgment. With judgment looming, Lot was urged to flee, but even then he hesitated. Why? Because sometimes the comfort of sin feels safer than the cost of obedience. In Genesis 19:16, the Bible says, Lot lingered. Despite knowing destruction was near, he hesitated. It took the angels physically pulling him, his wife, and his two daughters out of the city for them to escape. That single moment speaks volumes about how attached Lot had become to Sodom. And then came the moment that still haunts biblical history. Lot's wife looked back, not just with her eyes, but with her heart. She couldn't let go of what God was destroying. In that instant, she became a pillar of salt, a timeless warning for all who long for what God has already judged. Lot pleaded with the angels not to send him too far. He feared the mountains and asked to flee to a small nearby town, Zoar. God granted his request, but eventually Lot became afraid even there, retreating with his daughters into a cave in the mountains, alone, isolated and traumatized. Everything they knew was gone. The world as they saw it had ended. In that cave, away from civilization, surrounded by silence and fear, a twisted plan was born, one not led by faith or reason, but by desperation and a distorted perspective shaped by a sinful culture, a sinful decision in the darkness. Alone in a cave, no husband, no future, no hope, Lot's daughters looked around and saw nothing. And in their fear, they turned to the unthinkable. Genesis 19:31-32 gives us their words. Our father is old, and there is not a man in the earth to come in unto us. Let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him, that we may preserve the seed of our father. They didn't ask God. They didn't wait. They devised their own plan, one rooted in fear, not faith. But where would such a thought even come from? This wasn't just survival instinct. It was the residue of Sodom, a place where morality was twisted and evil was normalized. That culture had seeped into their thinking. On the first night, the older daughter made Lot drunk and slept with him. The next night, the younger did the same. And the Bible says clearly, he was not aware when they lay down, nor when they arose. This wasn't an accident. It was intentional, deliberate. A sin committed not out of lust, but out of desperation. and a warped view of righteousness. They believed they were saving the family line, but what they birthed was a legacy of trouble. The older daughter gave birth to Moab, the father of the Moabites. The younger bore Ben-Ammi, father of the Ammonites. 2 sons born of incest, 2 nations that would rise from shame and constantly resist the people of God. The cave became a cradle for compromise. And even though the fire of Sodom had stopped falling, its spirit was still alive in the hearts of the survivors. The birth of 2 nations. From the ashes of Sodom came not only survivors, but the seeds of 2 nations, born in secrecy, shame, and silence. The older daughter named her son Moab, meaning from father. The younger named hers Ben-Ammi, meaning son of my people. Their names were silent confessions, hints of their origin story, etched into identity. These sons would grow into tribes, tribes into nations, and nations into powerful enemies of Israel. The Moabites and Ammonites constantly warred against God's chosen people. They led Israel into idolatry, sexual immorality, and child sacrifice. Their existence became a thorn in the side of God's plan, until he turned even their darkness into a part of his redemption. Because from Moab came a woman named Ruth, a Moabitess who refused to stay in her past. She chose God, chose Israel, and married into the bloodline of King David. And ultimately the Messiah. Even from a sinful beginning, God wrote a redemptive story. But the truth remains. The birth of Moab and Ammon was not God's plan. It was the result of desperation, broken perspective, and a heart still tied to a fallen world. The sins of a single night echoed for centuries, and the consequences weren't just personal, they were generational. Lessons from Lot's legacy. The story of Lot and his daughters is not just a scandal buried in ancient history. It's a mirror, a warning, and a lesson for us today. Lot made a series of small compromises, choosing the lush land near Sodom, settling inside its gates, and raising his family in a culture of corruption. He believed he could live close to sin without being consumed by it. But sin doesn't stay on the doorstep, it enters the heart. His daughters, shaped by Sodom's influence, made decisions rooted in fear, not faith. They thought their actions were justified, preserving the family. But the absence of trust in God led to generational consequences. From their actions came 2 nations that fought against God's people and led many into idolatry and perversion. This shows us how deeply our choices can shape the future, not just for ourselves, but for generations. Yet even in this dark story, we see a spark of redemption. Through Ruth, a Moabite woman, the bloodline of Jesus Christ was woven. That's the mercy of God. He can redeem what was meant for shame. So what can we learn? Compromise has a cost. Living near sin often leads to living in sin. Our environment shapes our perspective. Who and what we surround ourselves with matters. Desperation without faith leads to destruction. And most of all, God's mercy can redeem any story if we let him. The fire fell on Sodom, but the real battle was in the cave. What fire are you escaping? And what darkness are you carrying with you? The story of Lot and his daughters may seem far removed from our world today, but the choices we make, the influences we allow, and the legacies we leave behind are just as important. So ask yourself, are we learning from the past or repeating its mistakes? If this story challenged you, made you think, or opened your eyes to something new, don't just walk away. Share this video with others who need to hear it. And drop a comment below to let us know your thoughts. What are you carrying from your past that needs to be left behind? And how can we, like Ruth, choose a different path toward redemption? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an eye-opening story like this one. Join us as we continue uncovering the mysteries and lessons hidden in the pages of history. Thank you for listening. God bless you. See you in the next video.